By the
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Redistricting Radar. This week we got myself and Harrison. We've also got Armin coming in, maybe some other people as well. You'll notice when Harrison starts speaking, he's got a terrific new microphone, so you'll be enjoying some audio quality improvements here. But we're really excited to talk about this week because it's the state of Georgia. We've written quite a bit about Georgia. I did an episode of the Map Room on Georgia. We've written a couple of articles that's been as a swing state. And it's got an interesting congressional contest with multiple competitive districts. What are your before we kind of go into the rules? What are your thoughts on the state as a whole? I guess just Georgia's congressional situation.
I think Georgia is really a fascinating state, both when we look at its political history and when we look at its current congressional map. You saw obviously the 6th district and now the 7th district are some of the best examples of suburban change in the whole country. Those North Atlanta suburbs there. The 6th district voted for Romney by 22 points, voted for Trump by just 1.5 points in 2016. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it was the scene of that really high-profile special election, which at the time had never, no other race had beaten it in terms of spending, when John Ossoff was narrowly defeated by Karen Handel. And then in 2018, Lucy McBath, who's a very inspiring candidate, ran on that gun reform message after tragically losing her son as a result of gun violence, and she was able to defeat Karen Handel. Now she's the incumbent Congresswoman, Lucy McBath, and she's favored for re-election as well. We have that race as leans Democratic. And in the 7th district, another district that's been moving towards the Democrats, it was not expected to be competitive last cycle. Carolyn Bourdeaux was running against Rob Woodall, but it ended up being the closest House race in the country. It was not decided for quite some time after election night, and Woodall only narrowly won, Rob Woodall. Now Woodall's retiring, and Bourdeaux is running again, this time against Rich McCormick, who beat Renee Unterman in the Republican primary there. He's the kind of Club for Growth endorsed style candidate who beat Unterman, who was an incumbent politician in the state legislature. We have that race as leans Democratic as well. Part of our reasoning for that is we expect the trends that we saw in 2018 here to continue. And one of the analysts I like on here, Niles, who's from Georgia, has also brought up that if Biden is either winning Georgia or losing it by a smaller margin than Clinton did in 2016, and if that could be enough to swing these districts considerably to the left, even if he doesn't win the state of Georgia. And one last thing that might also be a factor there is if you look at the primary, the composition of the primary turnout in the primary in counties like Gwinnett County that makes up a district like the 7th, very heavily Democratic. And granted, it's just a primary, but I think we could see quite a swing towards the left in North Atlanta here in these two competitive districts. And it's going to be interesting what happens once we get to the redistricting cycle. The Republicans, if they maintain their majorities in the state chambers, are probably going to end up pushing for a map that's favorable to the Republicans. Maybe McBath gets a slightly safer seat to discourage her from running statewide. Or maybe they get rid of McBath altogether. I'm not an expert on Georgia redistricting. We'd have to have someone else on to talk about that. But to get it back to you real quick so you can keep talking, I do find Georgia's politics very interesting, and I like Georgia's congressional I like their current congressional situation. I think we've got two very fascinating races here this cycle.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right into things here. So first off, what are the rules for Georgia? So like in many states, Georgia requires, the legislature to pass the maps and the governor to approve them. The governor can veto the map. So if Stacey Abrams had won the 2018 election, she would have been able to veto Republican maps because the winner was Brian Kemp and the Republicans maintained the legislature. They will likely be drawing the maps this cycle. Now, the Georgia House, their state House of Representatives, is more competitive than the Senate. Democrats would need to gain 15 or 16 seats to flip it. It's not really a top tier target, but it is one that people have talked about as a potential where it could get a lot narrower. So those are the basic rules. Oddly enough, Georgia does not have a requirement for contiguous districts, although contiguous districts are basically required by federal courts. So any attempt to make a map with non-contiguous districts would almost certainly be struck down. So one thing I want to go into here in Georgia real quick is the congressional districts of Georgia, the history of them. And I think this is important because people kind of don't understand the recent history in Georgia congressional districts. So obviously until recently, Georgia, until the 1980s was a very Democratic state. This is their legacy of segregation. suppression of the black vote, and so white Democrats were in charge for most of its history. But Republicans started making inroads, and so this is the map from the 70s to the 80s. You'll notice some of this is unusual. Like, for example, District 5 right here, the yellow district, takes in all of North Fulton and Atlanta, which is bizarre. It's a very strange decision that would be very contested today because North Fulton does not like Atlanta, to put it lightly. They feel that their Atlanta is a little bit more of a drag onto their economy, and some of them would actually prefer to be part of a separate county than but overall pretty stable map. One thing to note here is the 6th district, which was won by Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich was the longtime representative for this district. People often talk about the district that is the 6th right now, Lucy Smith seat, being Newt Gingrich's old district. That's true, but the 6 has been all over the place in terms of location. Notice here, the current 6 is in north. This is the northern Atlanta suburbs. This is in the southern Atlanta suburbs. Yeah, it has parts of Atlanta in it, actually.
Another very interesting thing, though, about the coalition in Georgia back at that time, and you saw this with a marquee race like the 1980 Senate race between the incumbent Democrat Herman Talmadge and his challenger Mac Mattingly. Basically back then you had actually a fairly strong, at least in that Senate race, because Herman Talmadge was dogged for his segregationist record during his time as governor in the late 1940s, and he was running for re-election to the Senate. So you had a pretty strong, actually, amount of African-American voters voting for Mattingly, who was a Republican back then. And on top of that, you had suburban whites and Republicans who had begun to become supportive of people like Newt Gingrich and Ronald Reagan, who ended up backing Mac Mattingly in that Senate race. And the rest of the Democratic strength pretty much came from rural white voters, both in the north and in the southern parts of the state. That was the core of Herman Talmadge's coalition. Even if you look at someone like Jimmy Carter, in both of his elections as president, obviously did very well in Georgia in 1976. It was his home state. Still won it in 1980. Didn't do quite as well, but even if you look at that 1980 coalition, even though Mattingly overperformed Reagan in some of those suburban areas. In fact, let me pull that up real quick in Georgia. I think it's a very good example.
It's a great example. There's a lot of things in that map that would be impossible
Carter
today.
was doing much better with rural whites than he was with the suburban whites around Atlanta. Like real quick, just for brief, I'll just share this real quick for the viewers what I mean. All right.
And it is worth noting that Jimmy Carter did initially run on a platform that was friendly to segregationists. He wasn't an outright segregationist, but he wasn't. He spoke approvingly of the idea that white and black neighborhoods could be separate. So back in that day, you still did have to appeal to that demographic in Georgia as a Democrat, even though obviously Jimmy Carter is not a segregationist by any stretch of the imagination.
No, and as you can see here, obviously Jimmy Carter wasn't perceived by black voters as a segregationist in the same way that Herman Talmadge, who was up for Senate in this same year, was. So he was able to do fairly well in the southern part of Fulton County here, and in DeKalb County he won narrowly. But in counties like Gwinnett and other counties bordering Gwinnett, Cobb, bordering Atlanta, he performed very poorly against Reagan. And this was very similar to the 1980 Senate race, where obviously you see rural whites in the north along the South Carolina border and rural whites down here in middle Georgia. And obviously the African-American support you have here running along the band in the middle here up to Augusta. Across the state, you've got rural African-American voters. But the 1980 Senate race in Georgia is very similar. The only difference is Mattingly was able to perform better in Fulton County as a whole, and especially you can see in DeKalb County, because he actually managed to win quite a significant block of African-American voters, which Ronald Reagan
one Fulton County
Atlanta was not quite able to do. So obviously you see that's the difference between someone like Talmadge and Carter, both of whom were able to do well with rural white voters. But as you can see, Mac Mattingly was able to do what Reagan couldn't do in his failure to win the state. And Mac Mattingly was able to win some African-American voters in Fulton County and in DeKalb County to effectively lock his suburban coalition to win that Senate race. So we can get back onto this history, but I think it's very important when you look at the history of white Democrats and how they did control the state of Georgia to look at what the coalition was and where it started for Republicans. It began in those suburbs and slowly began to expand. And it wasn't for some time that the Republicans actually managed to reliably win rural white voters in Georgia. Even up until the early 2000s, you still had some inroads being made, like you saw in other southern states in gubernatorial elections and row office elections.
Yeah, this is actually a trend you see in a lot of other southern states like North Carolina and Virginia. The very first places to flip were the urban areas, and those actually came back to the Democrats fairly quickly. But then the suburbs flipped permanently in a lot of cases, and then finally the rural places flipped from the top of the election down. So they flipped from the presidential election earlier, and then they started flipping for Senate and then for House and for these other races.
Even now, we still see remnants of that legacy. Congress people like Colin Peterson, for example, even though that's not in the South, it still applies to rural areas around the country. And of course, you have people like John Mark Windle, Tennessee State House 41st District. That district is composed largely of, I believe it's Fentress, Overton, and Jackson County, all of which voted for Trump with over 70% of the vote. And he managed to win re-election in 2016 and 2018. So, you've got some lasting legacies of that, where white voters, at least up until 2018 recently, were still partial or at least open to voting for Democrats in pretty heavily Trump districts for the legislative level, even though they really voted out most of their rural white Congress people in 2010 and 2014.
Yeah, and so we'll get back into the discussion here because that's really the most important one of these. The rest of these are kind of secondaries where you see the realignments. A few other things I want to note is you'll notice back then the population in places like Cobb County and Gwinnett County were minimal. I mean, Cobb County is lumped with the mountains, the deep, hardcore mountain areas. And Gwinnett County is lumped with basically the same sort of region, just kind of empty, sparse wilderness. Then you notice the 1980s here again, you see a lot of similarities, although the map gets weirder. You notice the 4th district here kind of stretches in from DeKalb County into these other ones like Newton. Some really unusual choices here to try and maintain a winning coalition for Democrats. And also the 6th kind of takes in some of Atlanta, but actually loses most of its Fulton portion as they basically ceded that district to Newt Gingrich.
And then it gets interesting here when we're in the 90s.
Yeah. So Democrats were ruthless in Georgia, as in most of the South in the 90s and even in the 2000s. You'll notice here the 6th flips entirely from south to north, the northern suburbs. The 1st is, the 11th is like this VRA abomination that draws in from Savannah to Augusta to DeKalb County. I mean, it's just a truly absurd district. And then also places like the 2nd and the 5th. The net effect of this was this is something that Republicans and Black Democrats had argued for, is that for a long time, even though Democrats had been successful in the South, Black Democrats are really disappointed because their votes were split up so that more white Democrats could hold. And they argued that they were lacking representation and they needed districts that had a majority of the population being Black, which is why you see districts like the South
at the very beginning, at the advent of the VRA in terms of drawing districts in 1992. Going into that cycle. I mean, you saw it in North Carolina. They tried to protect white Democratic incumbents while also meeting the VRA requirements. And it led to an abomination of a map. And on top of that, in 1994, they lost Democrats like David Price, Democrats like Martin Lancaster. So they already lost some of their Democrats in 1994. And those were the white Democrats they had tried to defend in 1992 in the map. Louisiana is similar, just like you have that abomination of an 11th district, as you said, running from DeKalb County to Savannah and Augusta, and even taking in some of the actual black belt that runs across the state there. You saw a similar district like that in Louisiana, which is probably the most famous example of gerrymandering to the general public that stretches effectively all along, and mind you, has little horns stretching into the state, little tendrils, but stretches all along the northern half of the state, down the Delta, and then down towards closer to New Orleans. But this happened all the time because you had what couldn't necessarily be done, especially with the environment slowly changing, some of these rural white Democrats becoming more vulnerable. It effectively led to the legislature trying to satisfy VRA while protecting them, which in many cases wasn't really possible without a really, really messy map.
Yeah. And keep in mind, Georgia Republicans didn't flip the legislature until the 2000s. I believe it was 2004 or 2006 where they flipped it and corrected some of these errors in the map that were just kind of appalling. But this is a victory for Black Democrats because they actually, although long term, obviously the districts were straightened out, what it meant the short term was that Black Democrats were given entrenched seats to run in, where they could operate in for future years. And so we'll move on to the next cycle. 1997 to 2002. Obviously, that map was sued,
Can you go back to the last map for a second?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Is that little bit contiguous right there of the
It's
second district?
contiguous, yeah. It just kind of stretches, yeah. It's barely
No, that
contiguous.
one that goes into the third district though from the second district.
Oh, the third?
Yeah, it doesn't look contiguous.
I'm not sure. It maybe using touch point contiguity. Um,
North
yeah.
Carolina did that a lot.
But obviously that map was challenged, sued, and corrected later, and so they resulted in this map, which is not perfect, but it's much better. DeKalb County is mostly intact. The suburbs look fine, and so that was what resulted the rest of the decade. The most famous one, a forgotten gerrymander, is the 2003 to 2006 map. This was not a partisan gerrymander. This is the we want to get rid of Newt Gingrich map. In fact, this is the only reason the map looks like this. The map was a 7-6 Republican map passed by a Democratic legislature. The main purpose was to force Newt Gingrich to lose his seat, and it worked. Newt Gingrich did eventually lose his seat, not to, or he dropped out, or in some scenario like this. I mean, you notice the 12th district just tendrils all into. They basically just messed up the entire suburbs just so they could get him out. This 13th is just even barely contiguous. I mean, look at this right here. I mean, this is just disgusting. I mean, frankly, this is a forgotten gerrymander, and only is forgotten because it really wasn't a partisan map. It was just drawn to get rid of Newt Gingrich. And thankfully,
that 11
Republicans
was supposed to be competitive or elect a Democrat, but that was actually a really competitive race in 2004 between Roger Kahn and Phil Gingrich. And Roger Kahn was actually expected to win, but then he lost, and it stayed Republican anyway. So that was
it was a bizarre choice. Yeah. Like they tried to make it work, but really the central goal here was to get rid of Newt Gingrich. And I'm not even exaggerating. You can look it up.
Why they got rid of it eventually, because a lot of their 2004 performance with this map was actually pretty poor in those elections.
Yeah. Although really the reason they lost it, the reason that this map was changed is because Republicans retook the legislature. And so they created a new map, which lasted until 2012. And this is a much fairer map. But the partisan composition actually did not change at all. This wasn't like Texas, where there was a mid-decade redistricting that changed the political environment. This map did not change the political environment at all. The only reason they did this was to just fix that map because it was just so disgusting that, I mean, people in just good conscience, even if it favored them, and it really didn't, but it's just like, it's so challenging to work with. There was no reason to hold on to it. And so this is the forgotten mid-decade redistricting. And then finally we get to our current map, which is very similar to the old map, although a little bit more partisan. Some of the best examples here, in fact, I'll actually go up to a better version, which has the counties. The 11th kind of stretches into northern Fulton. It's really not a great choice. The 6th is unusual. The 7th is really strange. There's a lot of weird choices here, but it's not nearly a maximally Republican gerrymander. This is a very mild Republican gerrymander. I mean, the goal was to get rid of a John Barrow, to get rid of his district, and it worked eventually. But they really could have done a lot more with these mountain districts. They just chose not to.
To be fair, they didn't really foresee their map becoming essentially a dummy mander with 6 and 7. When this was drawn, they were still safe Republican districts.
Yeah. I mean, obviously that was the point. 14 and 9 are some of the most Republican areas in the country. These are R plus 30, R plus 35 seats. There's a lot of room you can work with, and as our maps will show, that's the current situation. So what happened last cycle, was that the 6th district flipped, mainly because of that DeKalb County portion that was just put in there bizarrely. The Fulton portion actually held. And then the 7th nearly flipped because Gwinnett County is just becoming a lost cause for Republicans. But so that's the history. And so I guess we'll kind of jump into things and get into the districts we've created. I'm going to check one thing here real quick just to make sure I'm not missing anything. Yep, we're good. So I'm going to go ahead and start with mine if that's all right. If you want me to, or unless you want to show yours first. I have 2 maps. One is a Republican gerrymander. It's a maximally Republican gerrymander. And then the other is a fair map.
I just want to show these to not address the comment that someone posted here about the 2nd district.
Yes, go right ahead.
Southwest Georgia, does it have to be a VRA seat? You could. I don't think they would want to get rid of Sanford Bishop, but if you had a 4th VRA seat in Atlanta, that's pretty difficult to draw because you can really. It's much easier to draw 3 VRA seats in Atlanta with the current demographics and 1 in the South. You cannot draw 4 in Atlanta. It's really difficult to do.
They could probably get rid of Sanford Bishop next cycle because of population loss, but this cycle, it's honestly not worth it. He's very conservative as far as Democrats go. He's pro-life, pro-gun. He's not going to be the top-tier target for anyone And even if they were to get rid of it, he could still feasibly win even maybe a slightly a plurality white seat.
And
So
again, about the VRA stuff in Atlanta, it'd be very messy to do that.
Yeah, there's really no reason for them to do that, and that would just complicate things a lot. But so this is my map, and I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the county lines just so you can see how disgusting it looks. This map is designed to protect all of the incumbents currently. It's designed to open up the 6th and the 7th for new Republicans, and it's designed to ensure that those districts are not competitive in any way. So I'll kind of go into things from the start. I'll show you the districts as they go. So the first
viewers, if I'm not looking at the camera, I'm looking at my monitor. So don't think I'm ignoring Eric.
Yep. So what are the start here? So the first district is the same as it is currently. It's a lean Republican. It's a likely Republican seat. Stretches from, as you can see here, stretches from Savannah, Georgia, down the coast to the Florida adjacent portions. It's less Republican than a lot of other seats on paper, but it's very, very stable in terms of its lean. It's not flipping anytime soon. It's not it's actually trending Republican, but it's really bouncing out overall. This isn't a seat that Republicans would need to worry about, worry about losing. I don't think, because it's less Republican than some of the Atlanta seats, but it doesn't need to be more Republican. Voting down here is very racially polarized. So the second is a VRA seat. It's plurality black by citizen population, as the current one is, and it's narrowly Democratic. It would have voted for Hillary by around 5 points. It actually would have voted for Johnny Isakson by around 3 points, which kind of underscores how popular how popular he was as a senator, or not Johnny Isaac. It would have shown how popular he was as a senator because he was able to carry this district. This is a seat that leans to likely Democratic, although a Republican in a really good year could win this seat. It's not a top tier target, but given population declines, it actually could be competitive towards the end of the decade. The third district is it's basically designed to keep. Obviously, all these districts are designed to keep the incumbents in place. So the incumbent in the third district. Let me look this up real quick here. I want to make sure I have my names right. Is Drew Ferguson. He's from West Point. This district is basically the same thing. It's basically the portions around Columbus and then scoops in a lot of the exurbs and suburbs of Atlanta. So you'll notice right here, it includes the white portions of 2 counties right here. These counties are Newton and Rockdale, and Henry as well. It includes the white portions of those counties, which still lean Republican. And there's basically you look at the seat right here. This is a seat Trump won by 25 points. It's a seat that Brian Kemp would have won by 22. So not really competitive at all. The fourth is a new seat. It basically is designed to take the bluest portions of Gwinnett and put it with the DeKalb Democrats. So 57% black. It's a VRA seat. It would have gone for Hillary Clinton by around 51 points. Would have gone for Stacey Abrams by around 57. Very, very safe Democratic. And you'll notice right here that the portions it takes in, the portions it takes in are very, very Democratic, except for these portions, which are going to be Democratic soon. So that's really the reason the fourth looks that way. The fifth is disgusting, and it's basically just drawn to be another VRA seat. It's a 55% black. It's basically all of the Democratic portions of these counties right here. If you trace the racial votes, you'll notice again very, very black. Although the portions of DeKalb are plurality white, if I recall, they're not entirely. They're not. DeKalb. Yeah, DeKalb itself could fit an entire congressional district in it, but in this map, I didn't do that. The sixth is again, it's a new map. It's Trump plus 27 seat. Brian Kemp would have won it by 24, and this is basically designed to dilute the vote. So you'll notice right here, what this takes in these mountain areas. And then it also takes in this northern city in Fulton County, as well as Sandy Springs, which is a Democratic trending area in North Fulton, as well as a small portion of Atlanta, which leans Republican as a whole. The reason it does this is and also parts of Cobb County that are Republican as well. This district would not be competitive anytime soon. These rural portions are just so red that it really outweighs anything here. And the portions I drew in here are Republican leaning anyway. They're not trending too fast. I mean, you notice here, it only swung 3 points to 2018. So it's really not a competitive district. And it actually stayed pretty even in the AG race. The seventh is a similar story. This district basically takes in the most Republican portion of Fulton County, which is this portion from Roswell on, it takes in a red portion of Gwinnett County, or actually, it takes in blue and red portions of Gwinnett. But the big thing here is these counties up here make sure that this is never going to vote for a Democrat. This is a Trump plus 27 seat, and it would have voted for Brian Kemp by 22. So not competitive, and the Gwinnett split here is really just designed to, again, dilute the vote in that county. The incumbent in the 7th is retiring, so I had free reign to do whatever. And given that district's probably going to be represented by a Democrat, Republicans are going to have no problem with chopping it up. The 8th district right here is very similar to the current 8th district in a way. Austin Scott's Tifton district. It's basically the central portions of Georgia. Very white, very Republican, and actually trending Republican compared to 2008. The 9th district is again another. It stretches the mountains in again. This time it takes in a lot of Gwinnett County, but it also has in this county right here, which is the county that Doug Collins is from, Hall County, a very Republican area, as well as these mountain portions. This is a district, again, would have gone to Trump by 27 and would have gone to Brian Kemp by 22. So not competitive at all, won't be competitive. The 10th is very similar to the current 10th district if you look at it. Actually, it takes in less of the Atlanta area, but it's in terms of partisanship, it's very similar. Trump plus 30, Kemp plus 31, not a problem for Republicans. The 11th is basically it takes in the blue portions of, or the moderately blue portions of Cobb County, it takes in Marietta, Kennesaw, and then takes in a lot of these rural portions up here, including Bartow County and some other ones like Dalton that go up into the mountains. This district is probably has the largest Hispanic population of the Republican ones. This is a Trump plus 23 seat and would have been Kemp by 18. So this is the only one of the seats that would have gone to Kemp by less than 20 among these Atlanta area seats. The 12th is, again, very similar to the current one, takes in parts of Augusta, stretches down to Statesboro, home of Georgia Southern University, a really overrated school. And I said that as an app graduate, we don't really like them that much. Would have gone to Brian Kemp by 16, would have gone to Trump by 16. Not a lot to talk about. This is 13 is the most reasonable of my seats. It takes in basically all of Atlanta, takes in Forest Park, a couple areas in this county right here that's very Democratic, and is the most Democratic one in the state. It's Hillary plus 72. It would have gone actually to Stacey Abrams by 77. I mean, she would have gotten almost 90% of this district. It does split Douglas County, I believe it's called right here. The white portions of that go off into a different seat, which is the 14th. And the 14th, again, takes in part of the mountains, takes in the bluest parts of Cobb County. If you look at it right here, these portions are deep blue at this point. And this is a seat that Trump would have won by 28 and that Kemp would have won by 24. So, again, all these districts are Republican-leaning. And so this would be basically a very safe 10-4 map for Republicans. And I'll go ahead and show you the partisan lead of all the seats. This is for the governor or the presidential race. Basically, all these ones are seats Trump won by 20 or more. And these are ones he won by under 20. So very, very, very safe. The Senate race is actually a little bit different. As you'll notice, all of these seats are now deep red. They're all deep red, as well as the second, which is a light red. So that was a very, because the incumbent was very popular and outrun Trump by a very large margin. 2008, you'll notice very similar to the current one. There's not a whole lot of change there. Attorney General race was competitive this cycle, but Republicans would have won all of them by large margins, except the 11th, which they would have won that by around 20 points. So that's a smaller margin, I guess. Lieutenant governor is very similar. Trump would have, or the lieutenant governor candidate would have won all of these by a large margin and actually outran Brian Kemp. And then finally, the governor race. You'll notice not a lot of change here. So this map is basically a very stable map, as you can see. That was basically the reason that I drew it. It's designed to protect all of the Republicans, designed to make new Republican seats in the 6th and the 7th, and to ensure that Democrats can't win any of them because they're not going to win a Trump plus 27 seat anytime soon. These ones would have gone to Romney by even larger margins.
You need someone special like Colin Peterson. Even he looks like he's out to dry this cycle.
Yeah.
Plus 31 seat.
A John Barrow, someone along that line.
Even Barrow wouldn't do it anymore. Yeah,
it would be very hard. Just the suburban nature is just too much. They would really have to pump up that urban turnout because those exurbs are still blood red, 70 to 80%, conservative counties. And so my fair map is much better. Speaking, this is the one that could be drawn if Democrats claim the House. They might lobby for a map like this. And this is a very fair map, in my opinion. So you'll notice right here, the map looks a lot better. It maintains like some of the traits. For example, the first is a pretty fair seat. And some other ones look pretty similar, but it does make a lot of differences from the map. So let's go again district by district. I'll start with the first. Very similar. It's basically the exact same thing as the one I drew on the other map. There's really no need to talk about it. The Republican in that district, Buddy Carter, would be very safe. He outruns even the average Republican there. The second is, again, very similar. Johnny Isakson would have won it, and Hillary Clinton would have won it by 7, so a little bit safer for Democrats. The third is different here. It basically stretches from Columbus to Bartow County. This is basically all the exurbs of Atlanta, exurban areas. And so it's basically just kind of drawn to be a Republican area, and it would be very Republican. This is a Trump plus a 42 seat. So again, very safe for Republicans. The fourth is new here because it basically takes in all of DeKalb County except for two precincts. So this precinct right here that you'll notice I took out is actually part of Atlanta. This is part of the city of Atlanta, so I included that and also removed that. DeKalb fits very nicely into a single seat. It's a black area. Would have voted for Democrats by a very large margin, so very safe for Democrats. The fifth is again very similar to my current fifth, although there are some changes. Namely, the white portions of Atlanta are not included in this seat. So this is basically all of Atlanta plus portions of Douglas County. Again, very Democratic area. Stacey Abrams would have won very, very much so here, although it's a little bit more conservative than the previous one. And by conservative, I mean Stacey Abrams wouldn't have won it by 77. She would have won it by closer to 70 points. This is one of my favorite seats. I think this kind of reflects a lot of what Atlanta is. So 6 basically is all of northern Fulton, plus portions of Forsyth, a little bit of Cobb, and this county right here, which is an exurban suburban county, Cherokee County. This is a Trump plus 23 seat, and I would have went to Brian Kemp by 18. I know some Democrats would prefer a more competitive district here, but overall, I think this is what fits more with the residential patterns here. It literally is all of northern Fulton plus some of these exurban areas. The 7th is a new Gwinnett County seat right here, and it would be safe Democratic. You'll notice right here that it's actually only 45% white. Black would make up 33%, Hispanic and Asian another 11% or 10% each. Even Johnny Isakson would have lost the seat by 4, and Trump lost it by 15. So this is a safe Democratic seat at this point. Democrats would have an easy time here, and it would probably be, this is somewhere where someone like a Lucy McBath or a Carolyn Bordeaux could win, although I'm inclined to think a candidate of color would win the seat, given how diverse it is overall. Probably a black Democrat from some areas around there. The 8th is going to turn a lot of eyes in terms of what it looks like, but really all this thing is that it has to be drawn this way for the reasons I'll state later, but it's basically exurban Atlanta, like the most exurban areas, and then some rural and more urban areas are Macon and some other areas around here. Very Republican area, and actually trended Republican from the last time. The 9th is a new seat. It basically stretches from, it has the northern parts of Gwinnett, which are still conservative, has some of the Athens area portions, and then stretches into the mountains. It's a very Republican seat. Trump would have won this by 50, so it's not competitive at all. The 10th is actually the median seat. This is a seat that John Barrow would like. It includes all of Augusta, has a lot of these black belt counties, and then stretches to Athens. Trump would have won this by around 2 points, which is very close to his statewide margin. And then Isakson would have won it by 11 points. But on the other hand, Obama would have won it in 2008. It would have narrowly voted for all 3 Republicans running statewide in 2018. So very much a fair fight, competitive seat that is the median seat of the state. The 11th is a new Cobb County-based seat, and this seat leans Democratic. This would have voted for Hillary Clinton by around 3 points, but would have voted for Isakson by 11. And you'll notice here it would have voted Democrat for all 3 statewide races in 2018. Democrats would be favored here, although it's much wider and much more competitive than the 7th. So in a good year, Republicans could probably retake the seat, but it's too Democratic at this point, and it's trending really rapidly. So it would be hard to envision them flipping the seat back. The 12th is basically another seat that's basically just the rural portions of Georgia, stretches from the Florida border to the South Carolina border. Really white, really rural, not a whole lot to say about it. 13 is basically the southern Atlanta suburbs, and it's another VRA seat. It would have, although it's much more competitive than the other one. You'll notice this VRA seat would only have voted for Hillary Clinton by around 30 points, and it would have voted for Barack Obama by around 23. And the Senate race would have only voted Democrat by 22. So obviously, this is still a very Democratic seat, but it's not in the same league as the 5th or the 4th, because these areas are still a little bit more competitive than the rest of the state. Finally, the 14th is basically, I drew it this way to take in all of the northern Georgia portions that are not Atlanta suburbs. There's a couple of suburban, exurban Atlanta counties here, but this is basically just designed to be a really white, really rural, really Republican area. Trump would have won it by 60 points, and Kemp would have actually improved here, and he would have won it by 61 points. So he would have cleared 80% of the vote in this county, or in this congressional seat. So this would actually be, I think, one of the most, or if not the most Republican state or district in the country. If you actually look at how it votes, there is basically there's literally, aside from 2 precincts in Dalton, there is no blue in this in this district at all. So really, really just overwhelmingly Republican in every sense of the term. So how would this map vote? So I think Democrats would be very happy with this map, and Republicans would probably be all right with it as well, because it matches the state as a whole. So presidential results in 2016, Democrats would have won 5 districts. Actually, they would have won 6 districts, and the median district would be the 10th. Republicans would have won 7. So in a good year for Democrats, they could win 7 districts out of a 14-district map. Pretty fair for a state like Georgia, which still leans Republican a little bit. And Democrats also have a viable target in 1. But Republicans have a viable target in 11. So this could be anything from a 8 to 6 Republican, a 9 to 5 Republican map to a 7 to 7 split map. Very fair. For the gubernatorial race, or actually the Senate race will show right here, you'll notice these districts are redder. Democrats would have only won 4 of the districts in the state, although that's pretty fair geographically speaking. President Obama would have won the 10th district, so they would have actually won 5 districts in 2008, but the 10th would have flipped back in 2012. The Attorney General race, John Barrow would not have carried the 10th, but Democrats would have won again the 6 districts, and the Lieutenant Governor and Governor races tell the exact same story. So that's my map, although the only thing with the governor is that the 6th is a little bit more competitive here because it's under 20 points. So those are my 2 maps. Those are the 2 most likely scenarios I see happening. I think if Democrats had control of the legislature, they'd lobby for another Democratic seat in the Atlanta area, but they aren't going to have control of the legislature, so I do not see that happening. What are your thoughts on the maps, Harrison?
Oh, I like both maps. I think they're both very effective at what they seek to accomplish. I think the Republican gerrymander is kind of brutal, but I mean, it makes sense that Republicans would draw that if they wanted to go the harsh route. And as for your fair map, I like your fair map as well. I think it's very well drawn, fairly compact, looks nice. I guess I'll share mine now. Mine would effectively give the Democrats 4 safe VRA seats and 1 seat that would be considered likely Democratic for McBath. And I did that basically because I genuinely think even if Republicans have the legislature, they don't want McBath to run statewide with the way trends are going in Georgia. So they would give her a safe seat to make her feel secure in Congress in the U.S. House. But it does get rid of Bordeaux's 7th district, as you'll see. And given the fact that elections daily and I do the House ratings, and currently we have Bordeaux favored to win over Rich McCormick in that open seat. It's one of the seats that we expect to flip Democratic in November that's currently held by Republicans. So again, that's another example of an incumbent who would probably be in a little bit of trouble come redistricting next year, probably a 1-termer if she wins, and we expect her to win. So I will share this map real quick. And again, I'll be looking at my monitor, so I will be looking off the screen basically, so don't be confused by that. All right, so here's my map. And I also have the current map here, which we can turn on just to look at. So let's get this started just in case we want to look at this map. That's the current map. This is my map. So obviously you can see some similarities here, but there are also quite a few changes at this map level. Or 1 second. getting a bunch of notifications from. Let me turn off Discord. Sorry, 1 second. All right, sorry about that, guys. We actually have got Armin here as well now, so I'll add Armin in and then keep showing my map. Sorry I had to stop screen sharing. I had to close Discord. So we've got both our maps here. So I'll just go through my map first from District 1 to the current map, and I'll just be going back and forth comparing. And for any new viewers, I am looking at my monitors, so don't think I'm ignoring you. So first, we'll look at the 1st District. Wrong map. 1st District here. The 1st District is currently represented by Buddy Carter. And again, this seat's very similar to the current 1st District. Buddy Carter lives in Chatham County up here. So again, he is in a seat that's going to ultimately look fairly similar to his current seat. If you look at this one, the boundaries on my 1st are a bit smoother, but overall a fairly similar seat. 61% white. Obviously, Southeast Georgia is very racially polarized and therefore fairly inelastic. So even though this isn't a completely hostile seat for Democrats, if in some other places, a seat like this, if we look at the way trends are going in some other parts of the country, like, for example, some of the seats in Texas, you may say, well, this could be competitive for Democrats in a decade. But again, Southeast Georgia, fairly inelastic. So we see really no reason why. In my opinion, I don't see a reason or any way in which, within at least the next decade, this seat could be won by a Democrat. If you look at the current map here, it's basically just as Republican as the current 1st District, almost identical there. So we have that. And this would be the Buddy Carter district. If we go to the 2nd District, the 2nd District is the Sanford Bishop seat. It actually is narrowly a VRA seat, over 50% of the vote, so I made it majority black looking at total population, even though technically it just has to be plurality black. And Sanford Bishop is someone who's fairly conservative for the Democrats, and he has the type of appeal to the point where even if the seat wasn't majority black, he could win the seat. Kind of like Val Demings in Florida has quite an appeal to white voters as well and can win a fairly diverse seat that is not majority black. But this current seat is a different animal because it is indeed majority black. If you look at the total population and plurality black at voting population. Now, this seat is it is Democratic currently, likely Democratic, but with Bishop running for his elections, it would be safe Democratic for Bishop. But if you just look at plain old partisan composition, Republicans are in the low 40s here, so a likely Democratic seat. My current map here pretty much maintains that. It does have enough black support here to effectively make it or retain its likely Democratic standing. It's actually technically more Democratic if you look at the composite vote, and just about exactly as Democratic if you look at the presidential vote here. Again, when I say likely, I'm only referring to the partisan composition. Sanford Bishop is the type of congressman that makes a seat like this safe Democratic.
Definitely. So, I think either Drew Savicki or J. Miles Coleman wrote a really good piece on these sorts of African-American rural Democrats like G.K. Butterfield that are able to pull above their weight with white voters.
Exactly. And Sanford Bishop's very good at that, at least in the current district, because about half the district's electorate, or at least low 40s, is white, and he's able to appeal to them quite well.
And he actually survived in 2010 when his district had progressed to being a majority white seat. He'd actually held on to it.
That was a very close race. He was running against Mike Keown. I always say his name wrong, but he won 51-49, and that was his closest race. And that was a tough race, but he did manage to survive and was one of the few Southern Democrats to survive in a competitive or a marginal seat that year. So again, 2nd District, good news for Sanford Bishop. If you look at this on the county level, 1 second. Yeah, let me turn off. How do I get the precincts?
Oh, the precincts, click on precinct lines.
No. I mean like the underlay, the part where you can see the precincts below this.
Oh, partisan lean. Click on partisan lean. And then click on, yeah, there we go. So highlight, now click on map colors.
Click on,
turn off the top partisan lean. There we go.
Okay, so the second district, as you can see here, if we want to turn on our background map,
Hmm.
Sanford Bishop actually is from Albany. So he lives here in Abernathy County, right here in Albany. So that's one of the Democratic parts of the district. Basically, if you're looking here, you've got some rural black voters here in precincts like this. Then you've got rural white voters in precincts like this. And then again, you have suburbs of Albany, suburbs of Macon up here, and suburbs of Columbus. But the three driving Democratic vote portions of this district, what's keeping it Democratic? Three big cities here, or I wouldn't say big, but three cities that are pretty sizable for South Georgia: Albany, Columbus, and Macon. Make up the majority of the black population of the seat and the majority of the Democratic electorate of the seat. So that's one of the reasons why you got that seat the way it is. The third district is up here. This is the Drew Ferguson seat. As you can see, it's fairly similar to the current Ferguson seat. It is a bit longer and a bit thinner, but overall it is quite similar to the current third district, and Drew Ferguson would have no difficulty running here. This is a district that Democrats could not get over 30% in either the presidential or gubernatorial election. And if we look at someone, let's see here if I can load up the data sets for that AG race in 2018 when John Barrow ran. John Barrow was able to get 30% of the vote here, over 30. Even then, though, still very difficult. So if you look at this current map for this third district, this third is actually more Republican than the current one by a few points, about 4 points more Republican overall. So Ferguson again would have no trouble winning this. I mean, if you look at this third district, I mean, there's pretty much no source of Democratic votes here. I mean, really, the only Democratic precincts here are precincts with majority black population. So it's not exactly the most ideal situation for any Democrat running against Ferguson. Obviously, he's fine, safe. We'll look at the fourth district now. This is the Hank Johnson seat. It's one of the Atlanta VRA seats up here. And if we compare it to the current fourth district, you can see the shape is similar. Overall, the current fourth district is 59% black. My fourth district is 51% black. And if you look at it on this level here, it does take in, here, let's get county lines on here just to see how it splits. So the current fourth district, basically, it takes in parts of Rockdale and Newton County, which do have some a pretty sizable African-American population in their center. But the real driving factor of it being a Democratic seat and a majority black seat is DeKalb County. And it basically takes in all of southeastern DeKalb County, which, as you can see, is heavily African-American. If we look at demographics here, part of the heart of the Atlanta black population. And it does stretch into some of these plurality white precincts up here. But for the most part, this is the mainstay of this fourth district, Hank Johnson's seat. He'd have no trouble winning here in a primary, definitely not any trouble in a general election. And this seat is the kind of seat that, what's going on? What did I do? Oops. Sorry. And this is the kind of seat where you would not see any challenge to Johnson outside of the primary. So the next one to look at here is the fifth district. Up until recently, unfortunately, with the passing of Congressman John Lewis, this was his seat. Now this is the seat of Nikema Williams, who ran in the special election to replace him. And I haven't been following that particularly closely, but historically this was the seat of John Lewis, who unfortunately passed away earlier this year. But as you can see, it's heavily African-American, 73% black population, which is actually more than the current 5th district. It's very heavily African-American, and as a result, very heavily Democratic as well. If we want to look at this on the county level, the northern portion of the district takes in southwestern DeKalb County. You also have a portion that stretches into Fulton County, and you also have a portion that goes into Clayton County. You know, it takes in some famously Atlantan communities like Forest Park, which is currently in the 5th district as well. Once again, another VRA seat, the 3rd on the map, and another strong seat for African-American Democrats in Georgia. So
and Clayton County is just absurdly Democratic at this point. I think it actually used to be more competitive in presidential elections, but right now it is just it's a vote sink for Democrats.
Indeed,
if you look at it.
And
Let me look it up real quick here because I think the map you showed of that presidential race, it had been won. It was one of the counties that Ronald Reagan won over Jimmy Carter.
yeah,
And
well,
then
that's what we were
he won
talking about
73%.
earlier.
Yeah.
That's what I was talking about earlier with the old coalition for Republicans there,
Mhm.
especially where someone like Mattingly was winning Atlanta blacks, but at the same time winning the suburbs. And Reagan couldn't win the Atlanta blacks to the same degree,
Mhm.
obviously, but he did win the suburbs. And you could call it the collar counties around Atlanta that wrap
Yeah.
around Atlanta.
But
But not the
what you need to get is this number about Clayton County. In 1984, it gave Ronald Reagan 73% of the vote. In 2016, it gave Hillary Clinton 84% of the vote. That's about as stark of a shift in 40 years as you'll ever see in a
Yeah.
county. And that's in large part due to its population growth and the fact that it's now a very, very majority black county.
Yep. Real quick, going on to the 6th district up here. So this is the seat that's drawn. It is majority white, obviously, but there is a diverse population here. Below that, the diversifying suburbs here, you have a significant block of African American and Hispanic voters and even an Asian American community as well. So this 6th district voted for Clinton by 11 points. And given the way trends are going, this could be a seat that Biden could probably win by over 20 points if Clinton won it by around 11 points. So we're going to have to see. But again, this is definitely very hostile territory for a Republican. And I drew this because I think the Georgia Republicans are going to give McBath a safer seat so she doesn't run statewide, because she'd be a very formidable candidate, I think, statewide, especially in the suburbs, which are starting to become a Democratic coalition, suburbs in the urban areas. So they give her this seat. And
for me, I think they're going to try. I think that if they're going to draw a seat like that, I think this is what it would look like. That portion in Gwinnett and DeKalb are more than enough to flip it. I do think they'll try to salvage something out of Northern Fulton just for pride. There are a lot of Republicans in North Fulton donors who'll be very unhappy if they're put into a district that leans Democratic like that. But I do think they may very well reasonably. Yeah, they may well reasonably, decide to draw something like that. I mean, you'll notice right there up, I think it's Milton is still pretty Republican overall.
Norman says they can be like those people in Western Colorado on the tractor screaming if they don't like it. So
Eastern Colorado.
Yeah.
So
because I think there's potential for there's a potential for a Marietta to Gwinnett seat that keeps Lucy McBath there, but draws in more like that. But with your map, I think this makes a whole lot of sense.
Thanks. Yeah. So basically,
and if I recall right, I think Lucy McBath is from Marietta, right? She's not from. If I recall right.
True, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically the Gwinnett portion is fairly Democratic, and obviously not this majority white portion of North Fulton, but you've still got portions of Fulton County as well that are Democratic here. So this is a seat that would be, the trends are looking good for McBath, and McBath would have no difficulty holding this. I think she'd be able to win most of her elections by double digits if she's outrunning Clinton and Abrams in the seat.
Yeah.
So pretty safe. I know the partisan lean for the district as a whole will say leans Democratic. That's not accurate in my opinion. It's definitely likely Democratic, or in a really good year, safe Democratic. I mean, it's a fairly Democratic seat. And someone capable like McBath who's able to win the current seat, which is still a Trump seat, no difficulty winning a seat like the one I was talking about.
How much would Kemp have lost it by, or Stacey Abrams have won it by? Did you have that there?
Yeah, I do. Stacey Abrams, it actually was Trump performed better than Brian Kemp by a little bit, so he underperformed him by 0.3%. But Abrams would have done a lot better here. I think this is about what you'd see McBath getting, around 60-40. I mean, you'd still have that Republican mainstay of the vote in Northern Fulton, but it wouldn't be enough to flip the seat to the Republicans, especially not with trends where that's slowly declining over time. We'll look at the 7th. So the 7th district effectively gets rid of Carolyn Bordeaux, and currently we have Bordeaux favored to beat Rich McCormick in that race. I have it leans Democratic in our ratings right now. So I know the seat is a bit strange looking, but whatever seat is drawn, we can all pretty much agree that Bordeaux will probably be a one-term member of Congress. At the moment, it looks like, unless by some miracle the Democrats take both chambers of the legislature and have formidable majorities in them, it looks pretty much impossible to see Bordeaux getting a safe seat in a Republican gerrymander. So Bordeaux will probably be a one-term congressperson. This does get rid of Bordeaux's seat, though. I mean, it becomes a Trump plus 21 seat. Even again, this cycle, I mean, we can expect Trump will probably win this by double digits. And when I say that, I mean by over 10 percentage points. at least. And as even on the gubernatorial level, Abrams got just above 40% here, but it was still a fairly Republican seat. So if we want to look at a partisan lean, it's pretty much going to be fairly Republican because of Cherokee County and Forsyth County.
So Republican.
Both of
They're
which
about as Republican as Cobb and Gwinnett used to be.
And Northern Gwinnett is still Republican as well, even if Biden makes some pretty big inroads there. But really, the rest of Gwinnett is fairly Democratic, fairly diverse. But that's not enough at this point because there just simply aren't enough votes there to save Bordeaux. So she'd probably win Gwinnett by a fairly decent margin. But for Forsyth, Cherokee, and even the northern portions of Gwinnett here would just be too much for her to overcome in this seat. And if you put that on top of a potential Biden midterm where it could be a red wave, Bordeaux would either try and primary McBath in that closer 6th district or lose by double digits in the 7th district for re-election.
Yeah. Although one thing I want to know is since you have that precinct up, Forsyth County is like 75% Republican, but you'll notice there is that one precinct there where the Fulton is starting to encroach into Forsyth County, where that's like you're starting to see a little bit more of that suburban growth and more of an exurban county.
That's just telling you how long term things are going, at least with the current trends. Let's look at 8 real quick. So 8 is probably the most weird looking district on this map. This is the seat of Scott, I think, Austin Scott, unless I'm mixing up.
Austin Scott.
That's what I thought. Yeah, Austin Scott's seat. This is the seat he took from Jim Marshall in 2010, and he's held it ever since. He lives in Tift County, so he's fine. This seat would be safe Republican. There's not really much to say here. It basically takes the white areas around Macon and stretches all the way down in these majority white counties out here. Takes in a few of these counties that are in the current 2nd that would just make it less African-American, so I moved them over. But very similar seat, also very Republican, and in a way similar in design to the current one. That's about all you can say with that seat.
One little tidbit I want to add about Jim Marshall that I find really interesting is obviously people remember John Barrow, who was the more adaptable of the two. Marshall really tried to pivot to the conservative angle towards the end of his term. He actually wrote an article in National Review about why he opposed Obamacare, which is really unusual. You don't see a whole lot of Democrats writing in National Review, but that's really how he was trying to portray himself as and that was a much more Republican seat than Barrow's seat. Barrow was able to his, Marshall wasn't.
Right, because Barrow...
remember that in 2010, Barrow still won by a comfortable margin and was given a better seat in 2012, or given a harder seat, I should say, in 2012, and then lost in 2014, as you guys know.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, South Georgia realigned before East Georgia, which is why Marshall, even in 2006 and 2008, Marshall had much closer races than Barrow did.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a tough seat. Yeah, the article that he wrote was titled "Real Healthcare Reform." And he basically was trying to argue on a conservative case for some sort of reform that is not Obamacare. He really wanted to emphasize that he was not with Pelosi. You saw a lot of this where a lot of these white Southern Democrats, people like Bobby Bright,
Lincoln Davis.
Lincoln Davis. And then where they tried to pivot themselves as conservative and it failed. Then you have people like John Spratt who owned their Obamacare vote and they lost anyway. Like it really didn't matter whether you voted for or against it. You just kind of got screwed regardless.
Well, that was 2010. But back to this, the 9th district, again, safe Republican. Not much else to say here. And go to the 10th. 10th, also safe Republican. Both of these seats are going to have the 9th is going to what's the name of I forgot the name of the person who beat Matt Gertler in the primary. It was Andrew Clyde. Andrew Clyde, the new congressman from the 10th or from the 9th. Sorry. And then we have the 11th here.
Yeah. And the 10th has Athens in it. That's the only blue. That's the only really big blue vote getter there.
The 11th would be competitive in a really good year for Democrats. I mean, it was competitive in 2018 in both these elections, but still voted Republican. Overall, though, Loudermilk could probably be fine in this seat, at least for the current time being. But, if we look at the precinct,
I think he actually lives in Bartow County, if I recall right. So he would have to move to the
He
11th.
can run against Marjorie Taylor Greene then. But the 11th, if it keeps getting Democratic at a modest rate, unless it swings hard left, the seat could become winnable for Democrats. But currently, it's pretty evenly drawn as a seat leaning for the Republicans. And
Marietta
I guess
is looking pretty good for him. Bless you.
Thank you. The 12th district,
Ooh.
interestingly enough, Barrow got 43% of the vote here. This would be equivalent to his old seat. It has Richmond County in it, which is Athens. That's pretty much the only area you're going to get Democratic.
Augusta in here.
Other than that, it's going to be. Yeah, I meant Augusta. Sorry, I'm trying to think of like 8 things at once. It's not working very well.
A's few the city.
Fairly Republican. I could have just said that city over there, but
you get the Georgia people mad.
As Armin knows,
you get spooky centrists to get pretty mad at you. He wrote a good article about the Augusta area, which is basically it's basically a mini Georgia in terms of how it votes.
Yeah.
So the 12th. Again, slightly more Democratic than the current one, not at all Democratic enough to flip. The 13th is the last VRA seat, and this one would go to David Scott, fairly Democratic as well, 51% Black. And the 14th would be the Marjorie Taylor Greene seat, or actually the Barry Loudermilk seat if you primaries her, but he would lose commandingly. So, well, I mean, let's see. Yeah,
it's deep red.
It's not.
I mean,
enough.
it looks pretty red to me. So I mean,
win 100. He would pretty much win Bartow, but that's not enough to win the primary here. Like the whole primary, not enough votes.
Yeah.
So
what's interesting is in that northern area around like places like Dalton is actually kind of developing into a mini metropolitan area with a lot of Hispanic voters. I believe it's Dalton that has around 30% Hispanic, but they're not voters. They're mostly non-citizens or people who aren't registered to vote.
Yep. So that is my map, and I guess we'll pass it off to 1 second.
Yep.
Why is it not working? I will pass it off to Armin Thomas now to show his map.
Yeah. I think Democrats would try to sue if they got that map. So,
yeah. So the first one I'm going to do is the shameless Republican gerrymander that I did, and then I'll do my fair map. But yeah, I actually forgot about McBath running statewide. But, if 2022 is indeed a Biden midterm or whatever, McBath just might be, cooked anyway, even if she ran statewide. So my map right now here, let me share my screen. I believe is a 410.
Be careful they don't get a dummy mander.
I don't think they will. But okay, that's the fair. Oh,
that's why my rule of thumb was every seat needed to have voted for Brian Kemp by around 20 points, just to be safe in case anything goes nuts.
Okay, yeah. So mine does not have that, but if we're gonna go district by district, let's start. So the first district here, Buddy Carter's. I mean, it's not really based in Savannah, but Savannah is one of the big anchors there. I mean, if you take out Chatham County, over 2/3 of the population of the district is outside of Chatham County. And you can see it's very, very Republican, especially these counties down here, Pierce, Brantley, Wayne, Ware, Eccles. These are often like 80, 90% Republican now and extremely inelastic, which means, Savannah has some good trends for Democrats, but these are a giant albatross on any Democratic progress in the district. So this is going to be a safely Republican seat for Buddy Carter. I mean, as you can see, McCain got 55, Trump got 57. So there really isn't that much movement in the district. So next up, you have 2, which, again, the tried and true Southern Republican strategy of packing as many minorities as you can into Democratic seats. That's what I tried to do here. So you end up with a 54% VAP majority black seat that just takes across this entire black belt. Columbus, Albany, Macon, and the black parts of Augusta there with about, I don't know, what is that, 500 feet of contiguity.
That's pretty good. That's actually VRA, to be fair. The current district isn't a VRA seat.
I mean, yeah, this is a VRA seat.
It's interesting because I managed to get mine to be narrowly VRA, literally 50.1% black, but...
Oh, you can do that. I mean, if you make an actually decent looking seat down
here,
that's
kind of what I did. But you took the other strategy.
This is more fun. So
yeah, exactly.
I mean, this is more fun, and also the current map kind of cracks these rural blacks here. So I said, you know what? Sanford Bishop represents them probably better than Rick Allen does. So let's just give
Is
give
Sanford
them to
Bishop
him.
going to complain about this? No, he's probably not going to complain about this.
No, I mean, like, look, if we're getting what portion of the seat is in Western Georgia? If you take out these counties, I guess everything that's not in his district. So as you can see, roughly 70% of the seat is still based in southwestern Georgia. So Sanford Bishop is not going to complain about this at all. Maybe it frees him up to become a little more liberal. But yeah, no, this
primaries him and becomes the next Steve Cohen.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. This is the kind of district that could elect a Steve Cohen. I mean, there's still a decent amount of white Democrats in this area here.
I like this comment. I want to show this comment real quick. Is that Georgia Republicans are going to get Armin on payroll after seeing this?
Well, I do need a job, so
just go turncoat and just go for the money for Republican gerrymandering.
Oh gosh, yeah.
That's what we're going to get out of election Twitter. Just going to be these like
gerrymanderers,
like ninjas or samurai for redistricting. They just go to whatever pays the highest price. We'll draw you a gerrymander.
Yeah, we'll have like clans of gerrymanderers and stuff. So then we have
for Republicans to start hiring Adam Trencher or something, and then he'll draw unanimous maps.
His mathematical maps are just insane. He has a formula. He has a formula down for it. He literally comes up with the mathematical precincts that are the most to make the most mathematically efficient gerrymander.
Yeah, he's a genius. Yeah.
Who was that North Carolina guy that died? He would make him
Tom
proud.
Hoffler.
Tom Hoffler. He'd make Tom Hoffler proud.
Yeah. So then what we have here is District 3, which is starting to see some encroachment from Atlanta's southern exurbs in Coweta and Fayette and Spalding and Henry counties. That said, though, it's still really red because these suburbs are still really red. And, the Columbus suburbs include the white parts of Columbus, which in the South, outside of large metros, means it's very Republican. So, yeah, back in the 1980s, this would have been a very Democratic seat, but it's not the 1980s. Drew Ferguson, I believe, is the guy's name who represents this seat, and he lives in Troup or Meriwether or one of these counties.
Trouble for having
he lives in West Point, I think.
What? I'm sorry, what?
He lives in West Point.
He got in trouble for having a Confederate flag on his congressional desk.
Well, it's Georgia, right? So what are you going to expect? Anyway, he lives somewhere here. Even if he doesn't, this district looks close enough to his actual one that he'd be in no trouble. And any trends here are going to get canceled out by some trends here. So he's going to be fine. So then we have 4, which is the first of the nutjob VRA seats. It's 52% black. I mean, as you can tell with my shameless gerrymanders, I don't care about COIs. I think Hank Johnson lives in, where is it, Lithonia or somewhere like that?
It's in Lithonia.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, well, where is Lithonia? Is it in DeKalb County?
It is in DeKalb.
Okay, well, most of the district is, I'm pretty sure most of the district is in DeKalb. Let's see exactly. Yeah, roughly 2/3 of the district is in DeKalb. So yeah, Hank Johnson would easily represent this seat. Safely Democratic, it's majority black. So yeah, there's that one. Then you have the
Lord,
fifth
I'm just
here.
now looking at that DeKalb, northern DeKalb seat. Good God.
Oh yeah. Well,
Armin, what have you done with District 9 and 10? What have you done?
Well, it's shameless. I mean, it says here, shameless R gerrymander. But yes,
you could get a 14-0 Democratic gerrymander.
I've done 13-0 North Carolina for Obama before. I've done 14.
Oh, yeah.
It's mathematically possible as long as there's a number of precincts that as long as there's a number of length of the precincts, as there's at least a length of 14, you should be able to do it.
Oh yeah, it's impossible. There'd be still at least 3 or 4 Republican seats in Georgia.
Yeah. The best I can do is 10-4, I think. But yeah, so this year it's 74-75% blackish, somewhat higher than the actual number, I think. But basically most of southern Fulton County, Atlanta, part of Clayton County as well. the black parts of Cobb and Douglas as well. I don't know who is going to come out of that special election, but whoever it is going to hold the seat for life. So then you have 6 here, which is this is Trump plus what's its face? Trump plus like 17 or so. Mm-hmm. And that's not Trump plus 20, but Gordon is going to get redder. Bartow is still very, very red. Same with Paulding as well. This would kill McBath if she tried to run here. She'd be done.
They're not seeing that like basically what you're seeing in places like DeKalb and Gwinnett is the Gwinnett areas that are trending are outgrowths of DeKalb. The portions of Cobb that are turning blue are outgrowths from Fulton.
Yeah, exactly. Like this area here in Cobb is what's trending blue.
There's no outgrowth into Bartow County.
No, Bartow is barely a suburb of Atlanta. It's more of an exurb, and this part is not even in the metro really. But yeah, no, this would be a very likely Republican pickup, probably a safe Republican pickup. I mean, 10, 20 years ago, Democrats might have been able to run well here just by because Bartow and Gordon at some point wore Democratic, up until, the Bush era down ballot, they wore. But obviously that's not true now. So then you have 7, which is the continuation of this. Basically another identical seat to 6, except now it takes in Buckhead and, the white parts of Fulton County.
That is Franklin County, Ohio. I hate those precincts.
Yeah. So for those who don't know what we're talking about, is the precincts in Cobb are split precincts, or they're not contiguous. So if you're drawing a map, right? If you're actually drawing it in person, you can just split them off fine. But in this one, you're connecting areas that are distant, so you can't actually gerrymander effectively Cobb County because the precincts are literally separated from each other geographically.
They're non-contiguous. It's dumb.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it makes
7.
No sense.
I don't know. Where does Carolyn Bordeaux live? Does she live in Gwinnett?
Yeah.
Yeah. Either way, this 7th is nothing like the current 7th. It's more similar to the 11th, really.
Yeah.
But Bordeaux is out of a job, no matter what. I mean, maybe if Warnock loses this year, she can run for Senate in 2022 against Attila the Hun. Attila the Hun. Or Flavius I think, because Attila the Hun being a soldier or conservative or whatever. Anyway, so now we go to South Georgia. We have 8, which is, I guess, the complement to 2. And this here, very red seat. Jim Marshall was only competitive in his old days because it had Macon, and he was the mayor there and very popular there. And at the time, there were a lot more black voters in these rural counties, before they started to depopulate a lot. And the white voters still voted Democratic somewhat. But over here,
I have to get a computer charger.
Okay, yeah. Over here, you can see many of these counties are very red here. You see 70s, high 60s, 70s, 80s. Democrats aren't going to do well like that anymore. I mean, even Obama got 38, but you can see Hillary went down to 34. But yeah, Austin Scott lives in Tifton, right smack dab in the middle of the seat. I highly doubt he's going to be vulnerable in a primary. This would be a safe seat for him. So then you have 9, which is one of my ghastly seats. To be fair, I think I drew 10 first.
God, Armin, what have you done?
But yeah, basically, it's very easy to just crack Athens is influenced by just putting it with these like Walton, Morgan. Well, Morgan's rural, but Walton and Barrow especially are very fairly mid-sized counties that are very red. Mm-hmm. And these counties up here, Habersham, Stevens, Frank, Hart, all of them are blood red. And essentially, this is a Trump plus 18 seat. And what portion of it is Gwinnett? I want to see this. Yes, you see most of the district is, these rurals here. So it's a pretty effective crack of Gwinnett here. And it's Trump plus
Athens
18.
Voter, poor Athens voters. They're like Gainesville in Florida. It's like one blue area just surrounded by red. I mean, it's literally
the Gainesville seat is at least somewhat competitive on paper. This one is not even close.
Yeah.
And this is better than the current map when Clark County is cut between 10 and 9. This at least keeps it whole.
Yeah, it's a consolidated city county for those who aren't familiar with it. Clark and Athens are the same thing, so it's literally splitting a city in 2.
Yeah. I believe Jody Heiss. Where does he live? Because this is closer to the current 10th. I believe he lives in Bethlehem, but God knows where that is.
I'll look real quick. Yeah, he lives in Bethlehem.
Which is in which county?
Barrow County.
Oh, Barrow. Okay, I don't know if Barrow.
No,
Okay,
you put it in 10, but it's okay.
Barrow is in 10. So
Yeah,
Walton
that's
becomes a new. I don't even know what the incumbents would be for this because the gerrymandering is so insane. But yeah, Jody Heiss would get this 10th here, which, as you can see, is again basically the same 30, like Trump plus 17, Trump plus 18. This takes in very liberal people in the northern part of DeKalb, basically cracks them with. So you see, most of the vote are these very red Gwinnett suburbs. So down the line, this district could maybe make Republicans sweat, but it's still really, really red, mainly because Jackson, Barrow, especially the southern part of Gainesville, which is where Doug Collins is from, very blood red city. That's going to keep the seat red for some time. So now when you have 11. Okay, this one I did not care at all. Rayburn, Towns, these are these mountain areas here. They go down to Forsyth, which is blood red, but it's bluing somewhat. And then at the same time, you have, North Fulton, which is still very red, and, a Dunwoody in DeKalb County, just to top it off. And this here is Trump plus 34. So, yeah, no way a Democrat gets elected.
And actually, since Marjorie Taylor Greene lives in Merritt, she lives in North Fulton, so she could actually move to the 11th and run in that seat.
Yeah, I mean, actually, that makes sense. Like Gertler could run, or Clyde could run in 9, Heiss could run in 10, and the MTG could run in 11. God help the Georgia GOP if she does.
Yeah, she literally wanted to run in 6, and she was convinced to run in 14 because they're like, there's no way you can win in 14. So here, don't run in 6 where we want to win. Run in 14, and then she wins in 14 anyway. And it's like, well,
yeah, well, yeah.
She's literally a rich businesswoman from North Fulton that's cosplaying as a QAnon supporter. I mean,
yeah. Well, I mean, the whole QAnon thing is kind of one giant cosplaying act anyway. So then we have 12, which basically is East Georgia minus the black people and the cities. I mean, as you can see, like the current 12th is roughly Trump plus 17 or something, and it has some amount of black voters to provide a floor. Like John Barrow could at least run somewhat competitively there. This one is no. I mean, as you can see here, there's, I don't know, like maybe like a couple blocks of contiguity next to the Savannah River in Augusta. And literally, this is like the old 10th, and this is basically what the current 12th looks like, but with Augusta.
Yeah.
So Rick Allen lives in Augusta. I mean, enough of the white parts of it, which he probably lives in, are in the city, are in this district that he could just stay here and he'd easily be fine.
Nobody's going to complain about him being a city block outside of the district.
Yeah, exactly. So then you have 13 here, which is another majority black seat. In far South Atlanta. David Scott lives in, is it Clayton? Where does he live? Do you guys know?
He can move. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, this is a safe Democratic seat anyway, and it's majority black, so he'd get reelected no matter what. So then the kind of flip side seat is just 14, which is what I call the everything else seat, because there's no reason why Dade County up here should be with what is this? But with Heard County down here. I mean, Heard is currently in the 3rd, I think. But yeah, I mean, this is just everything else. Again, it's a super safe Republican seat. Tom Graves could probably try and come back if he wanted to in this seat because, I mean, it's open. I think. I don't think anybody lives in it.
I think he just resigned today, actually, or recently. So.
Yeah, well, somebody else, hopefully a little saner than Marjorie Taylor Greene, will come out of this. Although Northwestern Georgia seems to have a thing for kooky whack jobs like Larry McDonald and
literally the head of a John Birch Society.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so now we go over to the fair map, which hopefully I think we'll have a nicer time. Oh, right. First, we should turn on the partisan lean. So this is with 2016 president. But yeah, as you can see here, all these Democratic seats are safely Democratic. And these are just a bunch of likely Republican seats that probably aren't going to crack unless you have a 1935 style blue wave. And there is the stat, the analysis. As you can see, it hates my map, but it likes that there's four. It likes that there's 4 VRA seats. So that's how you know.
You could get that minority to 100 and probably everything else to a 0 if you added a 5th VRA seat.
Oh yeah, but see, look, the partisan breakdown is identical with the governors as well. Because I mean that like Abrams did better up here, but did worse everywhere else. So the trends kind of cancel each other out. But yeah, so now we go to the fair map, which is over here, which I think looks appreciably better by a lot. But yeah, why don't we start? So District 1 here, again, kind of a safe Republican seat that down the line could make some Republicans sweat, but not really. I mean, I tried to go like these whites here are inelastic, but they're much less inelastic than the whites down here. Like these whites down here are very racially, socially conservative and all that, and will not, budge from voting Republican. So yeah, Buddy Carter lives in Chatham. He's going to be fine. Then this one here. Okay, well, this is not exactly a VRA seat, but it's plurality black. It probably is pretty damn close to VRA. Clinton +8, Abrams +9. I mean, Sanford Bishop, he lives in Albany. He's popular enough to hold this for as long as he wants. And he'd have no problem with it. Then you have 3, which again is just a safe Republican sink in these exurbs and then these rules between Atlanta and Macon. Nothing too crazy here. Drew Ferguson would be fine there. I mean, if Bob Trammell loses, then maybe he can run a suicide mission in this district against Drew Ferguson. So then you have 4, which I think is a little better. It's a better drawn seat. DeKalb, Rockdale, parts of Fulton. But yeah, Hank Johnson easily going to win this. And yeah, safe Democratic seat. Nothing too crazy to report. I mean, 5 looks virtually the same as well. I mean, instead of 70% black, it's now only 59. Which means it would probably easily survive a court challenge saying that they packed too many black voters. Then you have 6 here, which is now I guess a leans Democratic seat. Lucy McBath's home in Marietta is there. Sandy Springs, North Fulton, Dunwoody. This Romney probably would have won this seat by double digits. But now it's definitely a Democratic.
Yeah. If you look at that PVI right there, it's R+4, and Trump lost it by 6. So yeah,
so Romney must have won it by
12.
20. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you have 7 over here, which 7 basically takes in all the minority parts of Gwinnett and part of DeKalb as well. So again, solidly Democratic. So that's 5 Democratic seats in the Atlanta metro area. Which
I like what you did with the mountains up. I know that's a little bit later, but your thought of the 9th is very similar to what my 9th was.
Oh yeah. So then we have 8 here, which is another South Georgia sink. I mean, Valdosta, Warner Robins, Tifton. I mean, those are the big cities here. I mean, outside of this, I mean, I've been trying to work on an algorithm to calculate how rural or urban a district is, and this is like a good example of something I could apply it to. Because if you take out Warner Robins, you can see most of the district is still very rural, and in these counties with. So this would be like a very much a Southern Republican rural district, and Austin Scott lives in Tifton. He'd have no problem holding the seat. So then you have 9 here, which is very much like the old 9th before Georgia had a gajillion seats, and it's mostly based in the mountains here. I mean, there are some pretty big sized areas like Dalton, Walker, Rome. Yeah, I mean up here though these are all very small. So most likely the congressman would come from the Northwest. But again, this is a very safe Republican
Yeah,
seat.
this is basically a mountain. I mean, this is if you look at it right there, that's a Kemp. Mine was Kemp won 80% of the vote. Yours he won 79.8. So this is like
exactly. Yeah,
this is absurdly Republican territory. This is maybe the most Republican district in the
a
country.
lot of these guys up here were unionists as well. So
Yeah.
they've been Republican for a while.
My man.
But nonetheless, the current ninth, I mean, historically speaking, they've kind of bifurcated the mountains into northwest and northeast. But you can do things a different way. So then what you do with 10 is sorry again to all the poor students at UGA who are going to have Jody Heiss as your congressman. But Athens,
again, they can just sit and scream.
Yeah, they can scream on the cotton plantation or something.
God.
Then Gainesville is in the seat, Athens, and Oconee. But again, this is another one of those really so I mean, if you take out these seats, it's roughly 50-50. But then Barrow and Walton, these 5 counties are the lion's share of the vote here. So basically, this is just a nice, clean-looking way to really dilute the voting power of Athens. Because, I mean, Athens in the greater scheme of things is not that big.
Yeah.
Like,
it's what, 190,000?
Yeah, like Don Johnson would have represented this in 1992. And if this was the map, he would have lost by 50 points instead of the 30 that he actually lost by in real life. But then we have 11 here, which, I mean,
I like that.
I didn't know exactly what to think about splitting Bartow and Cherokee, but I didn't really care. I mean, Bartow is with Paulding, and they seem similar enough. But Forsyth, Cherokee, the red parts of Gwinnett, bits of Hall, and then parts of Pickens as well. This is a blood red seat, R plus 26. So yeah, Romney must have won this by 40 or something. Actually, well, Trump won it by 40, so Romney must have won it by like 50. But where does Loudermilk live? Does he live in Bartow or Cherokee?
Loudermilk lives in the center of Bartow County. He lives in the non-incorporated area. Yeah.
Okay, I see.
He lives in Cassville, which is literally in dead center in Bartow, but like it's an unincorporated area.
I see. So yeah, this would be, I guess, the Clyde seat. This would be the Jody Heiss seat. And given that this would be the Barry Loudermilk seat, we could just say Marjorie Taylor Greene could just go into the 11th.
Yeah. Just a fun tidbit on here is that, like, literally where he lives used to be the capital of the county before General Sherman burned it down. And then they renamed the county and moved the capital to a different location because I guess it was just so humiliating.
I mean, yeah, it makes it like Sherman came from Chattanooga down south through Atlanta.
Yeah.
And then just basically Genghis Khan his way through Georgia.
It used to be called Cass County, and he lives in Cassville. Then they renamed it to Bartow County and moved the seat closer to the Atlanta area.
I see.
But it was literally burned. So
then you have 12, which, as you can see, is kind of competitive. It's Trump plus 11, Abrams similar margin, but unlike the first, which has a similar PVI, it's got Augusta, which packs a bigger voting punch, and also it has rural black areas, which the first does not. So someone like a John Barrow could do well here in what 2020 is shaping up to be like. This could be a district that does elect a moderate white Democrat. But Rick Allen lives in Augusta. He should be fine most terms. Yeah, I mean, these rural blacks, they're diminishing in population. But there's no reason to crack him again. I mean, I'm not one to just force trends to speed up along by cutting demographic groups up and the like. But then you have 13, which again is just the South Atlanta one. It's 52% black, so it's probably more in real life. David Scott, his only real worry is probably a primary. But as you can see, heavily Democratic. And then you have 14 here, which, as you can see, it's red, but it's starting to get a little less red. Stacey Abrams got 38% of the vote here, probably driven a lot from this probably a very good performance in Cobb. Yeah, Cobb is actually the majority of the vote here. She only lost this Cobb portion by 9 roughly. So yeah, down the line, this district could give Republicans some worry, but no, it's still going to remain. It's going to remain very red. I mean, in the Atlanta metro, it's possible to draw 6 Democratic seats. I mean, you can have the 5, and for the 11th, if you just make it go to Athens, you can get a Democratically trending seat there. But yeah, this is what it looks like. That's with the Abrams numbers, and with the Clinton numbers, what does it look like? Well, yeah, so Abrams definitely did better than Clinton there. And when you look at, how did Isaacson do? I'm interested in this. Okay, so yeah, Isaacson actually did very well in that 6th there, and he crushed it in South Georgia. But who ran against Isaacson? Was it Barksdale?
I'm not sure who.
What's going on? Oh, Barksdale ran against him in 2016.
Okay, yeah, that's
Sorry, I'm so out of it. I'm just trying to work on college applications and stuff right now. So
no, that's fine. But yeah, so this is Obama.
I like this. Yeah.
As you can see, he came pretty damn close in this 12th here. Barrow probably would have won this by like 25 or something. But yeah, these are there's no statistics for 2008. But if you do the statistics for 2016, here is the map, and analytics wise, doesn't like the competitiveness, but hey, it's Georgia. Everything is really racially polarized. What do you want me to do? But yeah, I think overall, I think this is a good approach at map. It says I don't understand what this means. If the number is positive, does that mean it's a Republican bias or a Democratic bias?
I'm not sure. The state bias is 5.3. Your vote is 3.3, I think.
Okay, I see. So you'd have to win.
Oh, no, actually, yeah, yours is a little bit more Republican than the state as a whole because your median seat is probably +5 instead of +3, whereas mine the median was around +3. But that's fine. It doesn't matter at that point.
Yeah. I see. But yeah, there's my map. I hope y'all liked that.
Yep.
Yeah, it's good. I
good.
looked at it at the beginning part, but then I got busy at the end. But
I like it. I think I like the idea of at least putting in part of Northern Fulton with Marietta. They're very similar. I think there's a difference between the southern. I guess I don't know what to call it. Southern North Fulton, or Mid Fulton, where between
like Sandy Springs and Buckhead and that.
Yeah,
area.
mainly Sandy Springs is much more Democratic now than the rest of Northern Fulton.
Yeah, Milton, Alpharetta, Johns Creek, all that's still quite red.
Yeah, Alpharetta is where Marjorie Taylor Greene is from, for what it's worth. So,
yeah. Well, guys, thank you again for watching Redistricting Radar. Do you guys have any final points you want to bring up before we end tonight's stream?
It's an interesting state in that you can feasibly draw a compact-looking Republican map that's a gerrymander and a compact-looking Democratic map that's a gerrymander. There's very easy ways to do this.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of things to work with. The big thing with Georgia, which I've mentioned before, the majority of the population, the vast majority of the population, lives in the Atlanta metro area. So really, the Atlanta area is going to control how the redistricting goes. If Biden starts doing 5-10 points better there, Republicans are really going to have to consider giving McBath another seat. Just the risks of it are too much of overexerting themselves and dealing with a scenario where they're having multiple more districts that are competitive.
And I mean, especially if Democrats start to win statewide, even this fall in 2020, but also state Supreme Court races, governor's races, the like, that definitely will impact how Republicans go about the process. Like in states that are trending away from the party, I'm always a fan of just conceding an extra seat or two just to lock in your majority, which is what I think. I mean, the 410 map I drew is a go for broke map. I think they'd be much better off just conceding a white Democratic sink for Lucy McBath.
Yeah.
And just shoring up the rest.
You can feasibly draw even something like an 11-3 map for Republicans, but it's really
illegal.
hard. Yeah, it's illegal, but who cares? But really, it's that Northern Georgia is the thing is that Northern Georgia is so red, it's not even funny. I mean, it's
the thing is, Northern Georgia is it's all concentrated in one corner of the state, which makes it difficult to disperse that redness.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally like the panhandle of Texas in terms of its redness, or Oklahoma, Western Oklahoma, Western Kansas.
It's not West Texas yet, but yeah. West Texas has several counties that vote 90+% Republican, and so far
There's a few that are like that in Georgia, in North Georgia at least.
In North, the only North 90+ ones I know are in South Georgia, like Pierce and Brantley. I know Brantley gave 92% of the vote to Brian Kemp, which is absurd.
Real quick.
Because Herman Talmadge
Trump won. Oh yeah, you're right.
He got in 1980.
Yeah, he got 80 to 90%, but it's mostly in the ones in the center of North Georgia.
Yeah.
Let's see the governor race. Yeah, the 90% ones were all in South Georgia in the governor race, but Kemp did improve in a lot of North Georgia overall.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, so I guess unless we have anything else to go over, I think that covers it for this week. It's it's an interesting state. I mean, it gained its congressional district last cycle, a new district, so it's going to have the same as North Carolina this cycle, 14. Its neighbor to the north, but obviously very different state and very different dynamics than some of the other ones we've gone over. I guess should we update people on what our plans for the next few weeks are? Because really these states coming up are very boring, and I don't think.
Hawaii is dumb. Idaho is pretty dumb.
Yeah,
Illinois will be fun.
Illinois is great. Do we want to just post the Hawaii and Idaho on Twitter? Because really, there's only none of those are going to be interesting. Hawaii is dumb.
I was thinking of doing things like that in one episode, like multiple states in one episode. So
let's do a small state special. Go maybe straight to
Hawaii,
Illinois,
Idaho, and Iowa
at some point. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you again to everyone watching the show tonight. We're going to end the live now, but